welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. I said that I wanted to bring you spooky cases in the month of October. And what is spookier than the Amityville Horror? We've all seen the movies. Well, at least the one with Ryan Reynolds, because Ryan Reynolds, am I right? If not, just go ahead and Google it. You'll see all the sweaty, shirtless images pop up, and you'll lose track trying to count his abs. Anyways, from 1979 to 2017, there have been 16 movies based on the events. More about the Lutz family who moved in after the Amityville slayings. They claimed the home was so haunted that they only lasted 28 days before fleeing in the middle of the night, never to return. We will get to them and their story later. First, let's talk about the infamous house, 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York, a quaint village in Long Island about an hour away from New York City. This is the site where 6 members of the Defeo family were murdered in 1974. It's a beautiful 3-story colonial home right along the Amityville River, 3,600 square feet with 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. This might seem like an average-sized home these days, but it was built in 1925 and referred to as a mansion. In 1965, Ronald and Louise Defeo moved into the home with their 5 children, Ronald Jr., who went by the nickname Butch, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. In the documentary The Real Amityville Horror, they refer to Ronald Jr. as Ronnie, which I would much rather say than Butch, so that's what I'm going with for this episode. Let me give you a little background on Ronald and Louise. In their younger years, both were considered very attractive. Louise was actually pursuing a modeling career when she met Ronald. Against her parents' wishes, Louise married Ronald. In fact, they disliked him so much they distanced themselves from their daughter, reconnecting only after the birth of their first grandson, Ronald Jr. Turns out they had good reason to dislike Ronald. He was overbearing and aggressive towards Louise. He parented in a similar manner. For whatever reason, he was extra hard on Ronnie. Being the eldest son, he must have expected more from him. The abuse started when he was just a toddler. Louise's sister recalls a time when Ronald threw a 2-year-old Ronnie against a wall. Sorry, but no freaking way am I going to stand by while my husband physically abuses my defenseless 2-year-old. I'd be out the door then and there. After the birth of their 4th child, Mark, Louise had enough and left. In an effort to win her back, he worked with jazz musician Joe Williams to co-write a song about their love. It was called The Real Thing. Joe recorded the song and Robert's efforts paid off. She came back to him and then they had one more child together, John Matthew. It's obvious there was turmoil in the Defeo home, not just between Ronald and Louise, but Ron's behavior was negatively affecting their children. Ronnie was quite chubby in his adolescent years and the victim of bullies at school. Kids gave him the nickname the Blob. You can imagine he had pretty low self-esteem given that he was treated poorly both at home and at school. At this time, the Defeos lived in an apartment in Brooklyn. With the help of Louise's father, they purchased the large home on Ocean Avenue. Her father also footed the bill for hand-painted, life-size portraits of every family member that lined the staircase in their new home. I don't know why, but that sounds so creepy to me. I picture the eyes from the portraits following you like an episode of Scooby-Doo. The portraits reportedly cost $50,000. Even today in 2021, that seems very expensive. The Defeos were definitely living beyond their means. Robert was a manager of an auto body shop, and there was no way he would have been able to afford this lifestyle on his own. When Ronnie was old enough, he began working at the body shop as well. In his teenage years, he started experimenting with drugs. Amphetamines helped him to lose weight, drastically changing his appearance. He went down a dark path, frequently using heroin and LSD. He spent his spare time drinking heavily at a tavern called Henry's Bar. The legal drinking age at this time was 18. It wasn't changed to 21 until 1984. Now that Ronnie was older and stronger, he began standing up to his father, and fights between them were a common occurrence. The evening of November 13th, 1974, Ronnie, who was now 23, barged into the bar and shouted, "You've got to help me. I think my mother and father have been shot." Ronnie's best friend Bobby ran over to help. He asked if he was sure. Was it possible they were just sleeping? Ronnie said no, he saw them and there was a lot of blood. Bobby, Ronnie, and 4 other men from the bar rushed back to the house on Ocean Avenue. As they entered, Ronnie's friend Bobby was in the lead and opened the door to the master bedroom. Robert and Louise were lying in the bed, both face down. Louise was covered with a blanket up to her neck, but Robert was exposed. He had been shot in the back and the blood was already dried, meaning they had been dead for some time. The men wondered where Ronnie's siblings were and ran through the house checking their bedrooms. Across the hall, 12-year-old Mark and 9-year-old John Matthew shared a bedroom. To their horror, both boys were found just like their parents, lying face down in their beds and shot in the back. One of the men called 911 to report the 4 murders, but they had yet to discover 2 more bodies. Just like the rest of the family, 18-year-old Dawn and 13-year-old Allison were found deceased, lying face down in their beds. Their estimated time of death was 3:15 a.m., meaning they had been dead at least 15 hours. Ronald and Louise had been shot twice with a .35 caliber rifle. The children were killed with the same weapon, but a single shot. What was interesting is how all the victims were found facing down in their beds. I highly doubt they are all stomach sleepers. A talk screen did not show any signs of the victims being sedated. That was 9 total shots fired. It's strange that none of them were awakened or showed signs of a struggle. Some experts think that the bodies were repositioned after death, but they were all shot in the back. Stranger yet, none of the neighbors reported hearing any shots fired throughout the night. I can understand sleeping through 1, but 9? Ronnie went from knowing nothing to claiming his family was killed by a mob hitman. He was taken to the police station for questioning. There, he changed his story, saying that it was his sister Dawn who killed the family, and he was only responsible for killing Dawn. By the next day, Ronnie had admitted to killing all 6 family members himself. A priest who listened to Ronnie describing how he killed his family said the only reasonable explanation was that he was possessed by the devil. This statement then morphed Ronnie's story. The devil made me do it. After this, he was interviewed by a psychiatrist. This is Ronnie's recollection of events, which honestly can be taken with a grain of salt because he was on drugs. He got high and kicked back to watch some TV. Then he heard people talking in the next room. It was his family, and they were conspiring to kill him. He looked up, and a woman in a hooded cloak approached him. She had black hands and handed him a rifle. Then he went upstairs and used that rifle to shoot his entire family, who were in bed, not in the next room conspiring to kill him. Let's touch on a few theories of what happened. Some people believe that Ronnie did not act alone. If that's the case, who helped him and why? A neighbor claimed to have seen Dawn walking outside, wearing a hooded jacket and black gloves. She was carrying a rifle down to the boathouse. Forgot to mention they had a large boathouse in the backyard right along the river. So, was Ronnie telling the truth when he said Dawn killed his family? Or was she the demon woman who handed him the gun? Some experts believe that Dawn and Ronnie had conspired to kill their parents together. Dawn is the one who shot her parents and then continued down the line killing her younger siblings. This theory makes me wonder because there was residue found on Dawn's nightgown as if she fired a gun. But then what happened? Did Ronnie snap and kill Dawn in retaliation for Allison, Mark, and John Matthew? Whatever it was that really happened, Ronnie took the rap for all 6 murders. He led them to the murder weapon, which was coincidentally down by the boathouse. The rifle did not have a silencer. It's still a mystery as to how no one in the area heard 9 shots being fired. While the house is large, the property was only on about half an acre. The neighbors were fairly close. He was interviewed by 2 psychiatrists, one for the defense team and another for the prosecution. And of course, they had different diagnoses. The defense team psychiatrist said that Ronnie committed the crimes due to the voices in his head urging him to do so. Ronnie believed it was a demon. The psychiatrist from the prosecution team said that Ronnie was a drug addict with personality disorder, but he was well aware of his actions. After the murders, he showered, disposed of evidence, and went to work for the day. It wasn't until after work that he barged into the bar shouting for help. December 4th, 1975, Ronald Defeo Jr. was found guilty to 6 counts of second-degree murder, which means 6 consecutive 25 to life sentences. He was taken to Green Haven Correctional Facility in New York. In later interviews, Ronnie said, quote, "Once I started, I couldn't stop. It went so fast. And we were a close family, you know? It's a shame what happened, but it happened." Ronnie has changed his story multiple times throughout the years. We may never know what really happened. He died earlier this year in March 2021 at the Albany Medical Center. He was 69 years old, and his death is still listed to be determined. I would love to know your theories on what you think went down at the Defeos. Email or DM me your thoughts, or you can go ahead and comment on my social media posts. Or right here if you're watching on YouTube. 13 months after the slayings that happened at 112 Ocean Avenue, the house was purchased by George and Kathy Lutz. They claimed that when they saw the listing and toured the house, they didn't know its history. After learning that 6 people were murdered there, George and Kathy talked it over with their 3 children and said it didn't bother them. They loved the house and it was perfect for their family. I call bullshit. No way am I moving into a house where 6 people were just killed. But maybe I'm alone on that one because there have been 5 other families that have lived there since. I'm picturing telling my son we're going to move into a house where a whole family was murdered, and I doubt he would say, "Okay, Mommy, sounds good." Nope. I'll be honest, I can research true crime all night, no problem, but the moment it turns paranormal, I'm up all night. Watching documentaries on this has me sleep deprived, guys. Back to the Lutzes. They bought the home and claimed that strange things started happening immediately. Within 1 hour of moving in, their black lab dog tried to hang himself. Yes, a dog hanging himself. Those are the words straight out of George's mouth. Apparently, the dog was tied up in the yard and jumped over the fence. The leash was too short and he was left hanging. Maybe the dog was trying to escape the negative energy from the home, but George made it sound like the dog understood that if he jumped the fence, it would create a noose and he could commit doggy suicide. He didn't, by the way. They were able to help him down and he survived. Whether they admit the murders that happened there really bothered them or not, they had the house blessed before they moved in. The priest said he felt something in one of the bedrooms and heard a voice tell him to get out. George claims to have woken up every single morning at 3:15 a.m. This also happens to be the estimated time of death for the Defeo family. He would wake at the sounds of screams and footsteps throughout the house and not be able to fall back asleep. He became restless and underwent personality changes. His friendly demeanor was now angry and short-tempered. The whole family noticed distinct odors throughout the house, described as the stench of bile and old stale perfume. George wasn't able to keep warm in the house and spent a lot of time outside chopping wood to build fires. I can picture Ryan Reynolds chopping wood right now. He played the part of George Lutz, by the way. The original 1979 Amityville Horror and the 2005 remake were based on the Lutz experiences, not the 1974 murders. There was one particular room that was said to be infested with flies. Even when they killed them, they quickly repopulated. They found this strange because it was the middle of winter and flies weren't present in the cold temperatures. Missy, one of George and Kathy's children, began telling her parents about her friend Jody. He lived in the house too, and they played together. Okay, creepy, but maybe it's just an imaginary friend. Missy said one time he presented himself in the form of a large pig with red eyes, and he told her that she was going to live there forever. Okay, that's creepy as hell. They also reported that their china set and the inside of the toilet bowls turned black. Green slime could be seen oozing out of keyholes. The green slime is the part that makes me question the validity of their claims. For many reasons, I would not stay in a home where mysterious green slime is oozing out of nooks and crannies. I'd be afraid to be breathing in toxic mold or something. I don't know exactly what happened the night the Lutz family finally left, but it was bad enough that they ran out with only the clothes they were wearing and never returned. They moved in with Kathy's mother and hired paranormal investigators. The original team of investigators said they did not charge for the investigation, but they were obligated to share their findings with the public. Lutz pulled the plug on them, claiming he didn't want publicity. But oddly enough, he already held a press conference about their experiences. I think he canceled their investigation because if they found nothing and shared that information, it would make them seem like frauds. William Weber was the defense attorney who represented Ronald Defeo in his murder case. Oddly enough, this is the same attorney now working with George and Kathy Lutz. One evening, Weber met with them to document their accounts of what happened in the home, all while enjoying many, many bottles of wine. As they started talking, Weber would go over facts about the Defeo case that seemed to make its way into their final story. For instance, the crime scene photos showed a lot of flies present in the boys' room, the same room that the Lutzes later claimed to be infested with flies. Green dust was used to collect fingerprint evidence. When pointing to the photos, the Lutzes described it to resemble the green slime they witnessed flowing out of the keyholes. George claimed there was a window on the second floor that would violently open and close on its own. On one occasion, it slammed shut, smashing the hand of his son. George took him to the hospital to treat his injury. Weber said, "Great, we can get the records from the ER to validate your story." But then George is like, "Oh, did I say hospital? I mean, we just bandaged it up at home." Not at all suspicious. Their very first encounter with Weber, he was already talking about book deals and movies. The story they ended with that night is probably not what they came in with. Weber sent paperwork to the Lutzes showing the percentage cuts for book deals and movie rights. It included convicted murderer Ronald Defeo getting 5%. Understandably, this pissed George off. He ended up ghosting Weber after that. A local news anchor contacted the Lutz family and suggested another investigation take place. She lined up psychic investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren from Connecticut. If those names sound familiar, that's because we are entering back into the world of horror films. The Conjuring and Annabelle series are based off the Warrens and their investigations. In fact, they have the real Annabelle in their possession, an old Raggedy Ann doll. Not quite as visually terrifying as she's made to look in the movies. Annabelle is within the Warren Occult Museum, kept in a glass case and surrounded by signs warning you, do not touch. Ed and Lorraine did more than just investigating. They have assisted in cases of possession and exorcism. The news station met the Warrens to document their findings. Lorraine said the moment she stepped inside the house, it was obvious there was something very demonic present. more than just the Defeo spirits lingering. While walking around and exploring the home, the cameraman from the news station said he felt stabbing chest pains. A camera was set up in the upstairs hallway. It snapped photos every minute throughout their seance and investigation. When the rolls of film were examined later, a young boy can be seen peering out of one of the bedrooms. Missy Lutz told her father that that was her friend Jody. As much as I think their claims are probably BS, there is no denying this creepy photograph. Parapsychologist and ghost hunter Professor Dr. Holzer brought a medium to the house, an elderly woman named Ethel Johnson Myers. Apparently, spirits are able to make contact through a medium. They can literally take over their vocal cords and speak. When Ethel walked onto the property at 112 Ocean Avenue, she reportedly grew an Adam's apple, spoke in a deep voice, and claimed to be a Native American chief who was buried on the land. The home was built on top of a Native American cemetery, and the chief was pissed. The chief is thought to be who coerced Ronnie to murder his family and sent the Lutzes running for the hills. In 1977, Jay Anson wrote a novel about the Lutzes' experiences titled The Amityville Horror, A True Story. It sold out immediately. Then came the cinematic version in 1979. It was even more over the top than the book. George and Kathy Lutz became celebrities. They were on the cover of magazines and going on talk shows to tell their story. The home became a tourist attraction. The quiet village of Amityville in Long Island was suddenly flooded with people from around the world coming to see the house. Another couple purchased the home after the Lutz family. They stated that the house was in perfect condition, no green slime, stained carpets, or broken glass. From what the Lutzes described happening there, you would expect it to be a mess. No family who has lived in the house following them has experienced any form of paranormal activity. Even Jay Anson, the author of the novel, said he's a writer and he likes to make money. It didn't matter to him if the story was actually true or not, but slapping a true story on the cover sure did help with sales. Every movie made sense has gotten further and further away from what really happened. But the thing is, there's no proving what happened. You either believe or don't believe. I am admittedly super gullible, but there is so much about this story that seems wrong. Many people believe the entire thing was a planned hoax. The Lutz family bought the house in the plan to make money off the statement that Ronnie believed something from within made him commit the murders. But the Defeos lived there for nearly 10 years. If there was a Native American chief who wanted them to get out, why did he allow them to live there that long before he coerced Ronnie to slay his family? And why has no other family who has lived there since experienced anything in the so-called most haunted house in history? The Warrens' investigation didn't help much for the non-believers. There's a lot of people out there who believe they are full of shit as well. Attorney William Weber had this to say, quote, "I know this book's a hoax. We created this story over many bottles of wine," unquote. Regardless of what happened to the Lutz family, the fact is Ronald, Louise, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew were all murdered. And that's the real Amityville Horror. And the story spawned some really entertaining books and movies. There's no denying that. As I stated earlier, tourists became an issue for the home at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house had the quarter moon windows on the third floor that faced the road, and people thought it added to the creepy factor, as if the house had eyes. Neighbors say that people would show up to peek in the windows, dig up chunks of grass, and take pieces of siding home with them, which is so weird. The constant flow of tourists was very disruptive to others living in Amityville. The house number ended up being changed from 112 to 108 Ocean Avenue to deter the tourists. In 2017, the house got a facelift. The quarter moon windows were replaced with squares, making it less recognizable as the iconic House of Horror. A family is living there happily ever after there, without any demonic activity. I hope you all enjoyed this spooky episode. I actually enjoy bringing these true crime paranormal mashups. If you're enjoying killer stories, please share the podcast with your true crime loving friends. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, I would be grateful if you could take a moment to leave me a review. My link tree is listed in the show notes, and there you can go to buymeacoffee.com to make a one-time donation, or there's also a link where you can buy Killer Stories merchandise. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast, or I'm on Twitter at Killer Stories PC. I've gotten so many emails lately adding to my list of cases. Please keep sending them, killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.